My job is that of a typical professor. We have responsibilities to research, to teaching, and to the university. So it's about a third. So a third of my work is service to the university, helping with running of programs, sitting on committees that make decisions around the university's policies and procedures. And then a third of the time I teach courses. The types of courses I teach in particular are things like negotiations, introduction to human resource management. I teach leading teams, and then my research. So I have a full research program that I think widely or broadly would be defined as falling within learning and development within human resource management. The companies that have the easiest time with recruitment are companies that already have an external reputation. So companies that do a lot of work not only with branding themselves for their consumer, but taking care about developing a reputation as an employer. And letting the public, not only letting their employees know, but letting the public know this is the type of employer we are, this is what we stand for, and then having policies that are consistent with this overall vision of who they want to be as an employer. And when that's the case, often there's a little bit more ease communicating with the public when it comes time to fill positions and to recruit. But also there's a bit of filtering, so people are able to self-select before submitting applications around what it is that this company stands for. Is this a company that I might enjoy working for or not working for? So that type of work that's done even when a job is not available can be really valuable in filling jobs quickly. Well, there are a number of reasons why it's really important for companies to retain their employees. So I don't want to give the impression, though, that it's important rather for companies to retain all of their employees. It's not. A certain level of turnover is important for the organization in order to ensure that you're getting new ideas, you're getting an awareness of what's happening more broadly in the market, you're getting a bit of freshness in the organization, people actually questioning the way you do things, so you don't end up in this place where we do things just because this is the way we do things here, right? So there is an acceptable level of turnover that should be encouraged. But beyond that, there is a need to have a core workforce that is engaged and committed and happy to be there. And that's important, first of all, for organizational knowledge. So there's actually a lot of research on the power of knowledge holders within the organizations, knowledge brokers, people within the organization who hold the keys to what makes this organization work. Things that aren't necessarily explicit, things that I can't write down in a manual and hand it to the new employee, but things we know because we've been in this place for a while now, and we know that this is the way things work here. So holding on to that knowledge is something that can be done by holding on to those key people within the organization. It's also important to hold on to employees simply because it makes the functioning of business easier, right? So from a logistical standpoint, to have continuity, to not be in this constant recruitment hiring cycle, which is a really, really expensive process because of the time it takes within HR. And also to be able to build effective work groups, teams that understand each other, that know each other, that have some experience together. So we know from research that groups actually have a life cycle of productivity. At the beginning of their life, they're not particularly productive. The time of their life, they could be quite cohesive and happy, but this is the time of their life where they're just kind of developing, getting to know each other, getting to understand where the strengths lie within the group, what people know. And then they have a period of time where they're incredibly productive as a group. And then after that time, the group kind of becomes stale and probably could become overconfident, and all kinds of things can happen that decrease productivity. So continuity is important to make sure that you can have groups or a workplace that is actually functioning within this optimal space where people they know each other, they've had a chance to understand each other, and now we are getting down to business. So retaining good and strong employees is always a challenge. Some of the things that we're seeing now, that people are researching right now, and I'll speak to the research of it because I think that's where I have the most to offer in terms of my knowledge. But the types of things that people are looking at right now are ways in which you can inject meaning into work. So it's things like, well, how can we structure work? How can we organize people's work such that the work itself is valuable to them and people do the work because the work is meaningful. So there's a lot of work on something called pro-social motivation. It's a type of motivation where if the person who's doing the work understands what the benefit of that work is to either another employee or to the end user, it will increase the likelihood that they will be engaged and motivated and committed to the task, which will in turn lead to higher performance. So it's not necessarily connecting them to a reward or telling them if you do this, we'll give you this. It's telling them if you do this, look at all of the things, all of the benefits that will come to others because of it. And it might, this doesn't have to be in an industry where you're raising money for people who need funds, where there's some sort of altruistic outcome. It can be in any industry where, because all of our work impacts other people, and just helping people identify in which ways does it impact. That's one thing that we're seeing a lot of in the literature. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of that I think is really interesting is around making progress within your work. So there's some work coming out of Harvard right now around, it's actually been going on for a little while, around the power of progress within work. If you can help people to make small steps towards an outcome that they're working toward, or to make progress, then that in itself is motivating. So teaching managers in a lot of ways to be facilitators of progress rather than managing the way in which work is done. Right? So what can I do to either open doors, acquire resources, remove obstacles that will enable my employees to feel at the end of the day that they've gotten closer to something that they're working towards. And that in itself can be something that can keep people motivated and engaged in their employment. So I think to connect it back to the points that were just made, I think that small businesses, they're kind of at an advantage because they're often dealing with employees who are closely connected to the outcomes that they're working towards within an organization, and employees who are doing a large range of activities because of the nature of small business, right? Everybody has to put their hands in where the help is needed. So to the extent that the leadership within the organization is able to communicate effectively, well, this is why we're doing all of this. This is what's important. This is what I'm aiming for. In the long run, I'm hoping for this outcome, this outcome, and this outcome. And to the extent that I, as an employee, can see how the work I'm doing is feeding into that long-term view of the world, can be really helpful at keeping me engaged. I'm working towards something meaningful. I know where this company is going, and I know that what my role is in getting us there. Right? That can be a useful way of keeping people connected. So I think sometimes we make the mistake, and I do it myself, right? I have groups of RAs, and often I find myself just handing them materials and saying, well, I need this entered into a database, or I need these papers reviewed and some notes on them, without ever telling them why or what it's connected to. And then that becomes a fairly rote task for them. But the minute I start to tell them, well, this is what we're working on, and isn't this interesting, and do you see how this connects to that? Then they leave the room with the task with a entirely different view of how it should be done. And it's just a simple way of motivating that I think can help keep people connected to why their work is important. And the second piece would be around the progress idea. The idea that if you can be a facilitator as a leader within a small business, sometimes we fall into these correction types of modes when if we can hire the right people for the job, trust that they can do the job, to the extent that you can do that. So a lot of the ability to use this principle comes from the fact that you have the right people in the right roles, and then just get out of the way and stay and do things that help them to achieve the outcomes that they've been, the path that they've been set on. That's a really important idea, the idea of making sure that as somebody is on their way out of the organization, that you're capturing maybe some of their knowledge, but also some of their experience and understanding why it did or did not work, why things did or did not work out. The exit interviews is kind of a classic way of trying to do that, and sometimes they're quite successful and sometimes they're absolutely not, right? So it depends on the terms with which somebody is leaving with the organization. If they're leaving on fairly good terms, you can probably get a fair amount of information from them. The problem comes when somebody's leaving and they're not happy in their leaving. Then it can be quite difficult to actually get the information you require. But there's an attempt should always be made, and an exit interview is a really great way to do that. Even following up with the employee, if, with their permission at the time of exit, asking them, sometime down the road, can we contact you again when you've had a little bit more time to think about your experiences here and you've had new experiences? Can we contact you for a quick 5 or 10 minute call around to revisit some of these questions? And that allows, once either the nostalgia, so the positive feelings, or the difficulty of a negative exit to kind of dissipate a little bit, and then you can actually get some more considered thoughts later on. And then if you get something meaningful, checking it out with your current employee set. So if there are some themes that come up from maybe 1 or 2 exits that happen, and you're concerned that there might be some themes, checking it out with the people that are remaining within the organization to see whether or not this is something that we need to be concerned about. What are the types of things that we can do to correct these types of the issues that we're observing?